Picture a Sunday morning in Dallas, Texas. The year is 2002. Summer. A young mother is getting her daughters ready for church. The baby, just 9 months old, is buckled into her high chair, gurgling softly. Her big sister, 7 years old, is probably arguing about her shoes. The kind of argument that makes parents smile without letting the kids see it. The house smells like breakfast, like family, like a normal Sunday. But outside in the backyard, a man named Abel is standing alone. He's 29, a husband, a father of 2, a man his church knew, a man his neighbors respected, and in his hand is the reason everything is about to end. Within 9 minutes, for members of his own family will be shot inside that house. And 20 minutes after that, Abel Ochoa will be standing calmly at an ATM, withdrawing cash, not running, not crying, withdrawing cash. Here's a question that haunted Dallas, haunted a courtroom, and haunted a jury that took less than 2 hours to send a man to death row. Was it the demon? Or was it the drug? My name is Not, and today we untangle this. Before we go any further, if you believe every victim deserves to have their story told with honesty and without excuses, hit that subscribe button right now. Because that's exactly what we do here. Trolls and sympathizers can keep scrolling. Before we talk about what Abel Ochoa did, we need to talk about who Abel Ochoa was. Because that's the part that makes the story so hard to sit with. Abel wasn't a stranger to that house. He built that life. He and his wife Cecilia had carved out something real in Dallas. A modest home, a tight-knit family, a community that knew their names. They had 2 daughters, Crystal, 7 years old, full of energy, and little Anai, 9 months old, barely old enough to know her father's face. The family went to church, regularly, not as a habit, as a belief. Cecilia was the kind of woman people describe as a pillar. Steady, faithful, the type of person who shows up when others don't. And Abel? He was a hard-working husband beside her. Neighbors knew him. The congregation knew him. Nobody was watching that family and seeing warning signs. They looked like exactly what they were. A family trying to build something good. Then crack cocaine walked through the door, and it didn't announce itself. It never does. It started quietly, the way these things always do. A bad week, a wrong crowd. One hit that promised relief and delivered a chain instead. Before long, Abel wasn't just using. He was consumed. His personality didn't shift overnight. It eroded, slowly. Then all at once, the warmth in his eyes, gone, replaced by paranoia. The steady husband Cecilia married, unreachable, replaced by someone erratic, unpredictable, and obsessed with the next hit. The family's savings, money they had built together, drained. Not stolen by a stranger. Spent by Abel on crack. And through all of it, Cecilia stayed. That detail matters. She didn't leave. She didn't give up on the man she married. Just weeks before August 4th, she physically drove Abel to a drug rehabilitation center. She sat with him. She believed recovery was possible. That is the woman who was inside the house on Sunday morning. By the morning of August 4th, 2002, Abel had been clean for 10 days. Not because he found strength, not because rehab worked, because the money had run out. And somewhere in Dallas that morning, he found more. It was a Sunday like any other. Cecilia was moving through the house the way mothers do, with quiet purpose, getting the girls ready, making sure Crystal's dress was right, checking on Anai, the kind of controlled chaos that only looks effortless from the outside. Her sister Jacqueline had come by. Her father, Bartolo, was there too. The house was full, not with tension, but with family. The kind of Sunday morning where the biggest concern is leaving on time for service. Nobody in that house had any reason to feel afraid. But Abel wasn't inside with his family. He was in the backyard, alone. He had managed to get his hands on a small amount of crack that morning. And standing there in the yard of the home he once built with his own hands. He used it. He wasn't looking for a high. He was looking for quiet, for the craving to stop, for one moment where his own mind wasn't eating him alive. He didn't get quiet. What he got instead was something far worse. The drug hit differently this time. Later testimony would describe it as a dissociative break, a violent disconnect from reality. The sounds drifting from inside the house. Cecilia's voice, Crystal's footsteps, the baby's sounds, the rustling of a normal Sunday morning, suddenly felt unbearable, like static turned all the way up, like needles. His brain was no longer processing his family as his family. He walked back inside. He didn't go to the kitchen. He didn't check on the baby. He turned right, down the hallway, toward the bedroom. And the house, full of life just moments before, didn't know yet what was walking through it. What happened next took 9 minutes. 9 minutes is nothing. It's the length of 2 songs. It's how long it takes to make a cup of coffee. It's the amount of time Crystal probably spent arguing about her shoes that morning. 9 minutes. And in those 9 minutes, Abel Ochoa walked out of that bedroom carrying a .9mm Ruger handgun and opened fire on everyone in that living room. We won't linger here. The victims deserve dignity, not spectacle. What we will tell you is this. Cecilia was shot first, then Jacqueline, her sister, then Bartolo, her father, then Crystal, and then Abel walked toward the high chair. But here is where the story takes a turn that a courtroom could not ignore. The gun ran dry, and Abel Ochoa walked back down that hallway to the bedroom and reloaded. He inserted a fresh magazine, and he came back. That single act, 12 seconds, maybe 15, became the most damning piece of evidence in his entire trial, because a man in a complete blackout doesn't reload. A man who can't stop, doesn't pause, walk to another room, and make a conscious mechanical decision to continue. The reload didn't just end lives. It ended his defense. But one person made it out. Alma Alviso, Cecilia's sister, was struck but not stopped. She ran through the front door, out into the street, away from the sounds that were still happening behind her. She carried a non-fatal gunshot wound and the weight of everything she had just witnessed. She would carry both for the rest of her life. Cecilia, despite her injuries, held on long enough for officers to reach her, long enough to say her husband's name. That identification, given by a dying woman about the father of her children, would be the first nail in Abel Ochoa's case. Abel didn't flee Dallas. He drove the family's Toyota to a nearby ATM, calm, focused, and functional. He navigated the menu. He entered his PIN. He withdrew cash. 20 minutes after the shots. He was arrested shortly after at a car wash. Not in a standoff. Not after a chase. At a car wash. When Dallas detectives sat across from Abel Ochoa and pressed record, he didn't deny it. He didn't lawyer up immediately. He didn't construct a story. He sat in that interrogation room, and he talked. And what came out of his mouth was one of the most chilling confessions in Dallas criminal history. I kept seeing the devil, he told them, but I also just wanted them to stop talking. Read that again. In the same breath, the devil, and irritation, not rage, not hatred, irritation, the sound of his wife's voice, his daughter's footsteps, the baby, the rustling of church clothes on a Sunday morning, sound that should have been background noise to a normal man, felt, in his words, like needles in his brain. The crack had turned his family's existence into something his mind could not tolerate. That confession became the centerpiece of one of the most intense legal battles Dallas had seen in years, because the question the courtroom had to answer wasn't just what Abel did, it was who was responsible for it. His defense team came prepared. They brought in neurologists, scientists, experts who spoke in clinical terms about what crack cocaine does to the human brain at high doses. Their argument was structured and specific. Crack hijacks the frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, rational decision-making, and distinguishing reality from threat. At the moment of the attack, they argued Abel Ochoa was not a man making choices. He was a chemical puppet. The drugs had created a transient psychosis, a temporary but total break from reality, where he genuinely believed his family were demonic presences, threats, things to be eliminated. They called it a frontal lobe hijack. It was a compelling argument, scientifically grounded, carefully presented, and the prosecution dismantled it piece by piece. Because in Texas, Voluntary intoxication is not a legal defense for murder. The prosecution didn't need to disprove the neuroscience. They needed to prove choice. And they had it on camera. Abel chose to acquire the drug. Abel chose to smoke it in the backyard of a home where his children slept. Abel chose to keep a loaded .9 mm Ruger in that same house. And 20 minutes after the shooting, that ATM footage showed a man who could read a screen, remember a PIN, navigate a menu, and complete a transaction. That is not a man whose executive function has collapsed. That is a man who knew exactly where he was. Then Alma Alviso took the stand. She was the only one who looked into Abel's eyes during those 9 minutes and lived to describe what she saw. The defense needed her to say he looked gone, vacant, lost inside whatever the drug had built around him. That's not what she said. She told the court that Abel didn't look possessed. He didn't look confused. He looked determined. That single word landed in that courtroom like a verdict before the verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty of capital murder. Death sentence. In the state of Texas, when 12 people can't find a reason to spare your life in under 120 minutes, the case against you wasn't close. The jury took less than 2 hours to send Abel Ochoa to death row. He would spend the next 15 years there. 15 years is a long time to sit with what you did. And somewhere inside that cell, something shifted. The man who arrived at the Polunsky unit in 2003 was not the man who would walk to the execution chamber in 2020. Guard described him as a model inmate. Disciplined, quiet, no incidents, no infractions. He didn't just follow the rules. He became someone other prisoners leaned on. He became a spiritual leader on death row. The man who once stood in a backyard smoking crack while his family prepared for church was now the man other condemned inmates turned to for prayer, for scripture, for the kind of steadiness that is almost impossible to manufacture inside a place designed to break you. Was it genuine? Was it performance? Was it survival? That question has no clean answer. His legal team never stopped fighting. In the years leading up to his execution date, they filed petition after petition arguing that Abel's brain had been permanently and irreversibly altered by long-term crack cocaine abuse, that the man who committed those murders no longer existed, not just spiritually, but neurologically, that executing a man whose brain chemistry had been chemically rewritten was a different moral question than executing the man who pulled the trigger. The courts heard the argument and denied it every time. But perhaps the most remarkable chapter of Abel Ochoa's 15 years on death row wasn't written by his lawyers. It was written by the Alviso family. Cecilia's family, the very people who watched her die, who lost Jacqueline, who lost Crystal, who lost Bartolo, eventually found their way to forgiving him, not excusing, not forgetting. Forgiving. They were Christian people. They had shared that faith with Abel before the madness took him. And in the impossible mathematics of their grief, they chose grace over bitterness. That detail doesn't make the crime smaller. It makes the story larger. Because now the question isn't just legal. It isn't just scientific. It's human. Does a man who spends 15 years becoming someone worthy of forgiveness deserve to die for the 9 minutes he spent becoming a monster? Does transformation count? Does it matter? Sit with that. Because on the morning of February 6, 2020, the state of Texas had already decided its answer. On the morning of February 6, 2020, Abel Ochoa made one final request: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, bread, a large soda, not elaborate, not symbolic, just the kind of meal a man might order at a diner on a Tuesday afternoon. The kind of food that reminds you of home. If home is still a word that means something to you, he ate it, and then he waited. The Huntsville unit, known simply as the Walls, is where the state of Texas carries out its executions. It is an old building, red brick, worn floors. The execution chamber sits at its center like a room that time built specifically for endings. Abel had spent 17 years preparing for this walk, and still, no amount of preparation makes that hallway feel short. He was led from the holding cell to the chamber, strapped to a gurney that is deliberately designed to look clinical rather than cruel. arms extended, for lines inserted. The room is small, quiet, divided by a pane of glass. And on the other side of that glass, his family, not strangers, not activists, not state officials watching on behalf of an abstract justice. The people behind that glass were the Alviso family, Cecilia's people, the same family that had impossibly, painfully found their way to forgiving him. They came anyway, because they needed to see it end. And Abel, strapped to that gurney, turned his eyes toward the glass and spoke. I would like to thank God for the life he has given me, a man about to be executed. Thanking God for his life, the same life that ended 4 others. That sentence alone could fill an hour of conversation. I would like to apologize to my in-laws for all the emotional pain I've caused. Not the murders. The pain, whether that distinction was intentional or not. Only Abel knows. I love you all and I've always loved you. Stop there. I love you all and I've always loved you. What does that sentence mean, coming from a man who shot them? Is it the crack cocaine speaking in past tense? Is it the 15 years of genuine transformation? Is it a man who loved his family and destroyed them anyway, and spent every day since trying to understand how both things could be true at the same time? There is no clean answer. There is only the statement, and the silence after it. At 6:48 p.m. on February 6, 2020, Abel Redville Ochoa was pronounced dead, 18 years after Crystal picked out her Sunday dress, 18 years after Nai sat in that high chair, 18 years after Cecilia drove her husband to rehab and believed, truly believed, that she could save him. So, we're back to the question. Was it the demon, or was it the drug? Here's the honest answer. It was both, and neither explanation is enough. The drug created the conditions, the dissociation, the paranoia, the sensory overload that turned a Sunday morning into something unbearable. Science can map that. Neurologists can testify to it. We can look at the frontal lobe data and understand clinically what crack cocaine does to a brain under pressure. But the demon? The demon was a choice. The first choice. The choice to pick up the pipe. The choice to keep a loaded gun in a house with children. The choice, and the reload proves it was a choice to continue. Abel Ochoa was not born a killer. He was built into one. Slowly. By a substance that doesn't negotiate and doesn't warn you where it's taking you. And that is the life lesson this story leaves behind. Addiction doesn't just destroy the addict. It destroys the wife who stayed, the daughter who trusted, the baby who never got the chance to know anything else, the sister who ran, the father who fell, the family that forgave a man who shattered them because their faith was bigger than their rage. Addiction reaches into a home and takes everyone, not just the person holding the pipe. If this story made you feel something, if it made you think about someone you know, a family you've seen slowly come apart, a warning sign you may be dismissed, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Share this video. Because somebody in your circle needs to hear this story before they become one. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Not for the algorithm, for Crystal, for Nai, for Cecilia, because their story deserves to be heard by every single person who can learn something from it. This has been not True Crimes Untangled. And now you know